Welcome to this deep dive. We've gathered quite a bit of material here, latest reports, observations from around the globe.
Yeah, lots to unpack.
And our mission really is to sift through it all and pull out the key insights on what's happening with global weather and, climate risks right now. Cut through the noise.
Get straight to what matters.
Exactly. And speaking of right now, the weather picture is, well, it's pretty dramatic, full of contrasts.
Definitely.
You've got places like the U.S. Southern Plains, Texas, Oklahoma. They're seeing severe flood warnings. The ground is just completely saturated.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just there. Parts of Africa, too. Nigeria, South Africa's Eastern Cape dealing with major flooding.
But then you flip the coin.
Right. At the very same time, you've got intense heat hitting the U.S. Pacific Northwest, the southern Great Basin.
Death Valley might push 120 Fahrenheit. And red flag warnings in central Washington, that's serious fire weather.
And don't forget the tropics are starting to wake up.
Oh, yeah. Tropical storms Barbara and Cosme spinning up in the eastern Pacific.
The Atlantic side is quiet now, but the forecast, that's pointing toward an above normal season later.
So floods, heat, fire danger, storms brewing, all at once across the planet.
Really makes you ask, doesn't it? Are these just, separate weird weather things happening, or is there a bigger pattern?
A more concerning picture.
Exactly.
And, well, the sources we've looked at are pretty clear on this.
Overwhelmingly so. You look at the big scientific bodies like the IPCC, the WMO.
The UN's climate panel, the World Meteorological Organization.
Yeah. They're not just saying there's a link between human-caused greenhouse gases and extreme weather. They're saying these emissions have actually measurably increased how often these events happen and how strong they are.
And the evidence they point to is stark.
It really is. That WMO report on the global climate, it confirmed 2024 wasn't just warm, it was the warmest year recorded. And crucially, the first full calendar year to breach that 1.5 degrees Celsius warming level compared to pre-industrial times.
That's that threshold scientists have warned about for ages.
Right. And CO2 in the atmosphere hit 420 parts per million. That's, 151% of pre-industrial levels?
Highest in at least 800,000 years, the sources say.
And methane nitrous oxide, also record highs. It paints a very clear picture of atmospheric change.
And the tough part is, these sources also highlight that some really big impacts, think sea level rise, the ocean's getting warmer, those are already baked in.
Yeah, irreversible for hundreds of years, basically, no matter what we do now with emissions.
Which means, well, it means we have to adapt to some level of change.
Definitely. Adaptation is critical, learning to manage these new realities. But it also screams for mitigation, right? Cutting emissions hard to stop it getting much, much worse.
Okay, so let's connect that big picture back to the kind of weather we're seeing today. How does climate change actually, turn up the volume on these events? Take heat waves.
Good example. The sources show that the year May 2024 to May 2025 wasn't just the hottest year overall, it also had the hottest January ever recorded.
And get this stat. Something like 4 billion people, half the planet, lived through at least 30 days of extreme heat during that year. Heat that was made worse, measurably worse, by climate change.
It's incredible. In nearly 200 countries, climate change at least doubled the number of extreme heat days people experienced. It just shows how the baseline, what we consider extreme, is shifting upwards.
Yeah, what used to be rare is becoming, well, not normal, but more common.
Yeah.
Hotter.
And that warming doesn't just affect heat. It messes with water, too, both floods and droughts.
Right, because a warmer atmosphere holds more moisture, which sounds like maybe just more rain.
Kind of, but it's more complicated. It means when it does rain, it can rain much harder, leading to those floods we talked about. But that same heat speeds up evaporation, disrupts patterns, and can lead to longer, deeper droughts elsewhere.
It's like the whole water cycle is getting destabilized, that weather whiplash idea.
Exactly, and you see it in the disaster numbers. Since 2000, flood disasters jumped 134%, drought disasters up 29%. That puts huge strain on, water supplies, farming.
Then there are wildfires. Another thing visibly getting worse.
Definitely intensified. Warmer temperatures, shifts in rain. It dries out the landscape, creates more fuel.
So you get longer fire seasons, more active seasons, and the fires themselves are more intense.
And spread faster. In the U.S., the sources say fires spread nearly 250% faster now than back in 2001. Globally, extreme fire activities more than doubled.
And there's that feedback loop too, right?
Oh, yeah. That's really concerning. Wildfires pump out huge amounts of carbon. That carbon adds to warming.
Which creates conditions for more fires.
Exactly. Carbon emissions from fires went up 60% between 2001 and 2023. It sort of feeds itself.
Okay, and finally, let's loop back to those tropical storms, Barbara and Cosme.
Right. Now, the link between climate change and how many storms form is still complex, debated, but the evidence is clearer for intensity.
Warmer oceans provide more fuel.
Precisely, fueling stronger individual storms. We're seeing a higher proportion of those really dangerous Category 4 and 5 hurricanes, and they dump incredible amounts of rain.
Plus, sea level rise makes them worse.
Absolutely critical point. It's not a separate issue. Higher sea levels mean any storm surge starts from a higher baseline. It pushes further inland, causes more damage, even if the storm itself isn't necessarily stronger than one from decades ago.
And forecasting when they'll rapidly intensify gets harder, too.
Yeah, those warmer oceans make that rapid intensification, which is already tricky to predict, even more of a challenge for preparedness.
So if we pull all these threads together, the big takeaway from these sources seems pretty unavoidable.
Yeah, it's not just random bad weather out there.
The floods, the heat, the fires, the stronger storms, it all lines up with and is clearly being amplified by these long-term changes in the climate system.
Changes driven overwhelmingly by human activity. The science is solid on that. The indicators, 2024 temperatures, the greenhouse gas levels, they're flashing red.
And the impacts are here now, not just future projections. We're seeing it in the heat risks, the water chaos, the fire behavior, the punch of the cyclones.
Which brings us back to action. What do we do?
Well, adaptation is key. We have to get better at managing these impacts, especially early warning systems.
Huge gap there. Sources say only half the world has adequate systems. The WMO Early Warnings for All initiative, aiming for 2027 coverage, that's vital.
But warnings only help so much if the underlying problem keeps getting worse.
Exactly. Adaptation buys us time, reduces harm, but it won't solve it. We fundamentally need mitigation. Deep, rapid cuts in emissions to limit how much worse things actually get.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. We know some significant climate changes are already locked in, irreversible for centuries. Seeing today's extreme weather through that lens, how does that change how you think about getting prepared, personally, and maybe the urgency of tackling those root causes globally? Something to chew on.